Hi everybody, Jillian here. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to make a video that was requested actually by a couple of people. A few weeks ago I shared this entry on my Instagram using some of the Print and Pray shop pieces from Shauna Klingerman, and I used this transparency piece that's from an older Amy Tangerine collection. I think it's from Finders Keepers. And I washi taped that into my Bible for this entry in Isaiah 55. So I just highlighted the verse behind it and then washi taped this in. And I wanted to create some hidden journaling here with a pocket. And so I used this 3x4 card from her set, embellished it a little bit, and then wrote my prayer on this tab, which you can slide in and out of here. So it's very similar to if you were going to adhere something from a clear cuts pad from Illustrated Faith. Like if you had one of these and it has like the full page design on it. It's very similar, except that this sheet came as a 12x12 and I cut it down to about 6x8 to fit my particular Bible. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what I'm going to use really quick, and then we'll get into the process on just how, another entry comes together using this technique. So I pulled this transparency from the, I think it's called Happy Place collection from Dear Lizzie. It's a little bit older. If it's still available and I can find it, I'll link it in the description below. So I pulled this transparency piece. I have used a little bit of it, but it originally came as a 12x12 sheet. I have just a white shipping tag. I think this is from Studio Calico. You can find them at Hobby Lobby and Michael's and your local craft store in large quantities. And then these are some of the die cut pieces that came from that same Dear Lizzie collection. And so when I scrapbooked, I usually stayed in the same collection and didn't mix and match too much. So that's why I pulled out some of these pieces to use also. I'm going to go ahead and put you guys on fast forward and get started now. So I decided that for this entry, I want to go ahead and journal some sermon notes that I have from a few weeks ago. And once I get that pulled out and set aside, I'm going to go ahead and trim this transparency down. I'm using my Fiskars paper trimmer here, and I go over it a couple times just because the transparency is a little thicker. I happen to know that my Bible will accommodate a 6x8 piece of paper or transparency, or that's just the size. So I knew to trim it down to that size. I would recommend measuring yours first before you trim anything. Next, what I am going to do is kind of put a messy outline around the chapter that I am journaling in, which is 1 Samuel chapter 24. I find that I draw lines most straight when I am going right to left, so that's kind of why I was rotating the Bible around. I am using some of the pink cross washi tape from Illustrated Faith here, and I'm just checking with the transparency to make sure that it kind of goes together. This is a little bit older, but I will go ahead and link it in the description below. It's one of my favorites. And I'm kind of getting an idea of what I want to put on the front of the transparency. So you would think typically that a typewriter and a cactus have no business being on the same page together, but after you watch this, or listen to what I'm going to journal about, you'll kind of get an idea why I put those two together. So once I get an idea of the elements that I want to use on top of the transparency, I'm going to go ahead and focus on embellishing the margin of the page underneath it. So I want to put all of my sermon notes into this margin, and I do want to embellish it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put a cactus down at the bottom right. So while I'm looking through the die cuts, I remember, oh, that Illustrated Faith has a whole sheet of cactus stickers in their new extended basics line, and so I ended up using one of the cactus from that set. Not the one that I just put on the page, though. I do go back and forth a little bit, so I kept all of that in here so you guys could see that I go back and forth with my entries when I have the time. So I'm debating about whether or not to put things at the top of the entry, and if so, what. So I'm going to move some things around a little bit, but in the end, I decided not to put anything at the top. So back onto the sticker sheet they go. And I will end up, like I said, swapping out that cactus that's on the bottom right. I am trying to keep in mind what these elements on the page underneath the transparency are going to look like. I don't want it to be too busy. So once I swapped that, I decided to fold that washi on the underside of the page, figuring I probably wouldn't journal something on the back, but instead I taped another page to it. So make sure that if you guys go that route, you don't tape pages of your Bible together. So when I got my sermon notes down, I knew that I had about 3 points that I had pulled out, that I had jotted down, that I wanted to transfer into the margin here. And so I pulled out the pink washi tape to kind of punctuate those thoughts. And so I took one piece and ripped it in 2 or 3 pieces, and that's going to kind of break up the sermon notes here. So in 1 Samuel 24, this is talking about, the header says David spares Saul's life. And so Saul is pursuing David and his hundreds of men. Saul and his guys end up catching up with David. Saul goes into a cave to relieve himself. Unbeknownst to him, David and his men happen to be hiding in that cave. So David had the perfect opportunity to kill Saul. Saul was pretty vulnerable, but David decided not to. Instead, he cut a piece of his cloak or his clothing, got close enough to him to cut that, and then presented it to him later, as if to say, hey, I had the opportunity to kill you, but I didn't. And so I will link the sermon series in the description below. It was really great. It was talking about messes and the messes that we get ourselves into, and what Jesus thinks of our mess and what he says about our mess and how we can get out of our mess. And so this was the fourth in the 4-part sermon series. And then the one thought I will read to you that I wrote in the margin here. It says, David was justified in and expected to kill Saul in that cave, but it wasn't virtuous. Each mess comes prepackaged with some bad options. Consider what story you want to tell. And so that's kind of why I chose the typewriter. When you're thinking of telling your life story or your testimony, consider what you want to include in that story and maybe what you don't want to include in that story. So I would just really recommend going and checking out that sermon series instead of relying on me to communicate all of the excellent teaching in there. So I have a bit of an empty spot there, and I decided to go ahead and put the pink puffy cross from Illustrated Faith there because it matched so well with this Dear Lizzie collection, and it just is a great little extra to add to a page. So here you can see I am getting ready to adhere the transparency into my Bible. So I'm using this washi tape. It's from Kelly Perky. It is no longer available. I think if you used Scotch tape, you would get a similar result looks-wise. So I put in the washi tape, making sure that it is, 1, shorter than the piece of transparency paper that I'm putting in my Bible, and 2, that half of it is hanging off of the edge of the transparency. I pull back the edge with my fingers as I'm positioning it in my Bible, lining it up with the edges, making sure it's not lopsided. And then once I get it to the place where I want it to be, I go ahead and release the washi tape and kind of gently smooth it onto the adjacent page with my finger. And then I'll go ahead and turn the transparency over and then smooth it down from the back side just to make sure that it's in there really well and that it's not going anywhere. So once I get that guy in there and he's good to go, I'm going to go ahead and trim the edges so that they're not so sharp. Next, I'm going to go ahead and work on the journaling tag with the typewriter. And so the tag was longer than I needed it to be, so I trimmed off a little bit that was hanging over. And you can see I just drew some messy journaling lines and wrote, what story do you want to tell? So it's kind of like a title page, kind of an indicator of what is journaled behind it. And I'm showing you there what the adhesive looks like. You can see the adhesive on the back side of this transparency, but it's not a big deal. It's certainly not the first thing you're going to notice when you look at this entry. So I am layering the cactus here with this little cactus flower or whatever it is behind it, and then I'm going to add a couple more pink crosses just to make it the entry a little more cohesive and fill in some empty spaces. And there you go, that's the front of the page. I'm realizing here I want to add a tab, so I thought about taking it from this piece of pattern paper from the same Dear Lizzie collection, but I decide instead to go with this cactus pattern paper. I'm going to use my We Are Memory Keepers tab punch to punch a tab out of there, and then I'm going to go to the word Fetty that's in the Print and Pray shop. This is from Elaine Davis, and I am going to cut out the phrase that says remember this, but I really only want to use the part that says remember. So Once I find that, I isolate it and then trim it down to the piece that I want. So you guys, remember, you can totally like customize these things and make them work for you. Then I'm going to go ahead and use my roller adhesive. I use the Elmer's. I don't love it. This is a Elmer's permanent roller adhesive. I'm just using it until it runs out, and then I'll find something else. And then instead of gluing that in, I'm going to use my tiny attacher to staple it in, but I ended up running out of staples, so I had to go find some more and then refill it. And then I got a phone call, so my camera stopped working because I had to shoot this on my phone. But once I get it squared away, there's the page, and that's it. Here is a finished look along with a couple of close-ups. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really enjoy making these videos for you. If there's something in particular you're interested in seeing, leave me a comment below and I just might take you up on it and make a video about how to do it, if I know how to do it, or maybe I'll try it out or something. Who knows? Anyway, be sure to check back next Wednesday for a new Bible journaling process video, and I will see you then.